this last round of elections on Tuesday, I mean, seems like overall a rout for the Democratic Party, and it just seems to be like all the analysis says that like it doesn't really mean anything in terms of a national election next year. But the results certainly hold true to the last round of elections in the midterms last year, which is that abortion is the kiss of death for Republicans nationwide. I mean, Ohio just passed like a ballot measure to legally enshrine abortion in the Ohio state constitution. That is, for those keeping track at home, the seventh straight ballot measure since Dobbs, affirming the rights of the right to have an abortion at the state level, the seventh in a row. And I mean, like, Felix, you've been talking about some choice meltdowns. I've been liking not so much the meltdowns, but this kind of the bargaining and the reassuring of one's own troops on the abortion issue. I saw someone writing in the National Review the other day that compared pro-life voters to gay marriage supporters in the 2000s, and they were like, "Well, it wasn't popular then, but look where we are now." Like, they're like that being against abortion is like a sort of a newer moral stance that people are going to take some time to warm up to, and not like the same position they've had for 100 years.
That's fucking incredible, because it's like okay, in the 2000s, did support for gay marriage cause like an incumbent party that was they had an incredibly unpopular president, they were LBJing themselves, let's say, they were thought accurately to be the author of a genocide, and then that same incumbent president's party just defied all conventional political wisdom. They almost kept the House in the midterms. They're doing this in off-year elections. I mean, what's going to happen? Is there going to be a new generation of people who are like, I like it when 9-year-olds are forced at gunpoint to give birth?
Yeah, I agree with that, Felix. I think part of Terrence and I were talking about this the other day. We were talking about like a lot of people just kind of secretly like sort of being weirded out by the, a 10-year-old having to carry a baby to term type shit. But like, whereas like a few years ago, I guess under Trump, when everything's sort of upside down, maybe they were like a little like willing to cast their lot with that bunch. And now it's like, they just kind of want some sort of semblance of normality. And they're kind of rightly weirded out by shit like that.
Tom, I've always felt that with abortion and abortion polling that pro-choice obviously always like polls well, but even among people who call themselves pro-life, I feel like there is about like a quarter, maybe even more, of people who, if you poll them, say they're pro-life, but when you press them on it, they're like, oh yeah, no, well, I'm pro-life except in cases of like, it's a medical emergency, or like a woman who's raped, and then you keep going down the list, or like, she doesn't think it's a good time to have a baby, or what, like they're actually like unconditionally pro-choice, but they're just afraid to outright say it. I feel like that's a quarter of people who say that. And like the numbers seem to be agreeing with that. The margins are far beyond what we were told is, the national split of pro-choice and pro-life.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Hell, I grew up in the Pentecostal church, really on the margins of Christianity. And I would say that's right, man. Like even my mother, who was a Pentecostal Sunday school teacher, would sort of, she would sort of launder it through we might as well legalize it because people are going to do like home abortions and all that stuff, and it's unsafe for them and da 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 da. But really, I think they hold those pro-choice views, but just sort of have to have that pro-life veneer for whoever their crowd is or whatever.
Well, I think those results were borne out by the Ohio ballot referendum legalizing abortion in Ohio, and then like invalidating every law passed since Dobbs in Ohio by Governor Mike DeWine and his allies. The data shows that, like, again, this measure passed by double digits, as did many of the previous six that I talked about. Like, double digits in American politics today is like, that never fucking happens. But what the data showed is that like many of the people who voted yes on this ballot measure went on to vote in the same election for Republican politicians who branded themselves as pro-life. And I think, like, to your guys, to Felix and Tom, to your point, I think the pro-life position is one that's broadly shared in this country, as long as it remains a total abstract philosophical principle and not anything that we're like is actually practicable. And then when
Yes.
like as you see, like as it's abortion is criminalized, you begin to like the practical realities of what that philosophical point of view entails if you believe abortion is murder, that they have to be dealt with. And now we're seeing like at the polls, people are dealing with it in I guess the one of the few ways our democracy affords them.